what about that guy that just paid off
Oh,
his Land
like,
Rover?
yeah, and he's not allowed to drive it.
Suddenly he has this thing that is valueless, and he just dumped his entire life savings into it. Do you think the government's going to offer him like, hey, we'll buy this vehicle, we'll buy the scrap of this vehicle from you? And we are live. Welcome to the Millennial Experience podcast. I am Luke Adamson.
And my name's Eddie Ambrose. And
today we're going to talk about things that we are interested in talking about.
That's right.
We hope you enjoy. So something we were thinking about talking about today is something that's been on my mind is, let's say within the next 50 years, there comes a time where the environmental issues caused by burning gasoline have become so severe that we've got like no time left. And it's like, this is it. We have to stop all gas production,
right.
all gas usage.
No more CO2.
No more fossil fuels.
Right.
At that point, what the people that just finished paying off their $40,000 Land Rover, that is a purely gas car, they just spent the last 20 years of their lives working and scrimping and saving just to pay off their dream car, which was this Land Rover, that suddenly all the gas stations are closed. There's nowhere to buy gas. It's illegal to maybe even drive a gas vehicle.
Right.
Because it's just, we've gone too far. We can't use anymore. At that point, how do we convince people or help people transition from petroleum-based vehicles to something more sustainable like electric?
So it's a good thing you mentioned that it's a situation where we just had to stop right now, right? Which is why it makes it a complicated situation. So I would assume if the government knew it had to go through with that, where it's just cancel everything that's petroleum, everything that's gas, all of that, I'm going to imagine that they would have already invested in at least electric public transportation while people buffer into being able to change into electric vehicles. Because one thing I know, and I think that we'll all have to accept, is that it's going to be expensive no matter what. And I think it's just going to hit harder when we wait until it's that late, like absolutely that late. It'll hurt versus us even trying to pick it up now little by little, a genuine first step.
But if, let's say we did start now, really pushing in that direction, do you think that those costs, like you said, it's going to be expensive.
Right.
Do you think those costs are going to fall on the consumers and on the drivers themselves? Or do you think the government is going to offer some sort of grants or something?
I think it would be responsible for the government. And I think they're not going to be able to just get away with it through taxpayer money. If taxpayer money does not include corporation taxes, they're going to have to. And I think they're going to have to, if they want everyone to just full stop, then they're going to have to provide options, because if they also want the economy to keep going, then they kind of have to give you some option to get to work if your work requires
So,
it.
And by that you mean public transportation. So electric buses.
And I'm thinking, electric buses,
trams.
I'm assuming I think production of electric buses that would hold multiple people would be much faster to make than to convince Ford and Chevy and GMC, can you quickly just start making electric vehicles and then individually sell them at whatever the cost is going to be, probably something around $40,000 for the cheapest one. It's good. That's a little harder to convince people to be like, hey, invest this amount of money. No, I think there's going to be a buffer zone where you're going to have electric buses that get spread out, or at least as efficient, more efficient than thousands of cars. You know how the freaking rush hour gets in Phoenix, for example? You remember that? That's insane.
Oh, yeah.
That's insane. It's just a thick snake of cars just blowing smoke out. So yes, I think that would be kind of nice. And if that came out of my taxes and that was like available to me just to use,
Yeah,
I think that's fantastic.
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Or at least, my question is, what do you think? What about that guy that just paid off
Oh,
his Land
like yeah,
Rover?
and he's not allowed to drive it.
Suddenly, he has this thing that is valueless, and he just dumped his entire life savings into it. Do you think the government's going to offer him like, hey, we'll buy this vehicle, we'll buy the scrap of this vehicle from you, for, the cost of what it was worth when you paid it off or whatever, and that will incentivize him to go buy an electric car.
Right. If you get something like a credit back for
Yeah.
those materials, you might be right. Where like basically you can use the majority of that car, and I don't know much about like the mechanics of an engine, so I don't know how easy it would be to change a gas use engine to an electric one.
I imagine it'd be very difficult.
Yeah, so I think if you can use the majority of the car, you might get the government to buy back the cost of the engine and replace it.
But
Or like I don't know, because you know how they do recalls for just current vehicles like now? Like
what do they do with those parts? Do they?
right, like I think if we're just taking the current existing technology of a Land Rover right now, it's going to be really hard.
It
But-
won't be worth anything to this car owner, and it won't be worth anything to the government, because the cost it would take to somehow turn that Land Rover or its parts into an electric vehicle would either be impossible or just as expensive as making a whole new car anyway. Because can you just take these old car parts and
No, I
melt them
know.
down and turn them into?
Because I'm thinking it's not going to be 500 new Land Rover users. I mean, if we're talking about every single vehicle that will have just been paid off,
Or
we're talking about
even
millions
ones,
of vehicles that would have to go back. And even if it were a simple mechanical thing, it would still be a lot of vehicles that would have to go back.
almost all vehicles.
And they would have to be towed back if you didn't want them to be driven.
Yeah.
It would be very expensive. So,
I assume you'd be allowed to drive them somewhere. Like
right.
this is assuming, over the next 20 years, let's assume
Yeah.
between now and then that we all start heavily transitioning. There just has to be a way, because there's too many people just going to the dealership today, for instance, and
Right.
getting into a brand new car that they're going to be paying off for the
Mhm.
next 20 years, or hopefully not that long, but at least the next 5-10 years.
I think the cheapest option, and I don't deal with millions and billions of dollars, but it might be that you need to incentivize that car production lines. You just try your best to start making engines hybrids, at least, at the very absolute least, at least when that let's say that a situation comes up where they're like, full stop, like we're all gonna die if there's one more
Gas vehicle.
more gas vehicle. I would say you might even be better off if the majority of the vehicles were already mostly hybrid. If we're really gonna try to accommodate the fact that people will not be able to transition overnight. But like I'm telling you, if they had some option for me to trade in my car right now for an electric, whatever it was, I don't care. I would do it right now.
Yeah, in a heartbeat.
I would do it in a second. Yeah,
Right.
I would take that immediately.
But the problem is, if our entire society runs on money, there's no incentive for the government to offer that to anyone. There's all these corporations that are making the cars, that are making the gasoline, that are doing... I just don't know what the solution is, because people, even if you give them that option, not everyone's going to want to switch over. So there's got to be a heavy push, like from somewhere. I don't know what force it is that's pushing, but some force needs to be pushing, going, get rid of your gas car, get this electric car. Here's how we're going to help you pay
Right.
for that.
I remember hearing, man, I forgot who it was. It might have been Bill Nye, but you'd have to check. Um, he was saying that like he was thinking people underestimate how awesome it is to have an electric car.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I'm hopeful in this way that like the transition of an electric vehicle from a petroleum based will be equivalent from like those first like Ford cars, like those first wagons, to where you had like a car that could like handle like even the like an automatic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just don't know. I don't know. Look, assuming that battery technology gets better and better, so you'll get a lot more range. Well, you'll slowly get rid of all the reasons or excuses people make up for not wanting an electric vehicle. And range is one of the most popular ones I hear people mention.
And if you can charge your battery as fast as you can fill your tank
Right,
with
as fast
gas.
as you can fill your tank with
So there's
gas.
just battery charging stations
Right.
where you go pay
and
for the electricity.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they bring little inconveniences like that, considering the long-term effects of climate change. So that doesn't bother me that much.
No, me neither.
It
But
really just doesn't. Especially the fact that since not everyone's gonna run and go get like electric vehicles immediately, like I'm not worried about the fact that I can't like charge my car. Like,
mm-hmm.
but otherwise, like everyone plans a road trip. So it's not like someone who has an electric vehicle isn't gonna blindly get in the car and start driving. Of course you're gonna like calculate your miles and then check where your stops are.
And
that's what everyone's gonna do.
In Teslas, you can right inside of its own programming, it shows you
where
all the charging stations are on a map.
Great.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if there were charging stations like that replaced all the gas stations, we're talking plenty of places to charge your car.
Like I was saying, to have an electric car charging station, we looked it up, and to get like a Tesla charging station that you'd have in your garage or something at home, it's like $1,000.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah.
Just be able to have it.
So you just anytime you're home, you're charging your car, and it just stays fully charged. If you're not driving more than a couple hundred miles distance from your house anyway,
that's perfect.
no big deal. And then if you do go on a trip somewhere, you just stay at hotels or wherever, places that have an electric charging station. So it's all of the excuses definitely are starting to fade away.
Yeah.
Especially if the government incentivizes these things for hotels to like make sure they have lots, like half the parking spots have electric chargers.
Right. It's something that you would advertise as a hotel.
Yeah. This is one of our amenities. We have free charging stations or whatever. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
With the cost of your hotel room, unlimited charging for your car.
And and that will, I mean, that will definitely help, because it's really weird to see defensiveness or pushback on changing to an electric vehicle, even with all of its, if you want to call them, inconveniences. Because again, like, I think these are the same people who aren't considering, again, climate change and the next 20 years. Those inconveniences, they're going to go away. Mm-hmm. You're going to get upgraded technology, because we're not trying to like continually use the same like petroleum-based technology like all the time. Yeah. And then I also heard that petroleum-based vehicles require a lot more maintenance, so there's a lot more maintenance cost versus an electric vehicle. Yeah,
there's a lot less like fluids and potential cloggages of parts, because it's pretty much just like a battery, and then and it makes some wires run coming out of it, and everything. So
like no use to things
it.
like the things that get all oily and
nothing gets
like
all
dust,
clogged up, and I'm sure there's still maintenance that needs to be done, but the level of maintenance is
not as costly,
way lower. And if basically your engine is just a battery, so if it dies, you just switch it out for a new battery, which is it brings the potential cost of these vehicles down the road could be very, very low.
I think so too. That's the thing I think about too, that the advancement of electric cars is the kind of thing where that technology gets cheap really fast. The way that like CD players, like depending on the brand, you can have like the $20 one or like the $60 one back in the day.
Yeah.
Or I guess now, what do you have? MP3 players, but people don't really use that anymore.
No, yeah.
But anyway, sorry, going back to Teslas, that one I almost branched off.
That's fine.
I think like I said, I think if people don't want it to bother you that much and you don't want it to affect your life that much, I would consider letting us or encouraging us to do little by little. The thing is though, bro, like, and the way I am about technology is that if you did allow little by little and people started realizing like how much better an electric vehicle will be and how much cheaper it'll be, it's gonna like, there won't be any more control with lobbying and gas companies anymore. People are just gonna be like, fuck that. Like, I don't want a freaking car that should belong in a museum. Like, I want something from the future.
And if
like an electric car.
If gas companies were smart, like ExxonMobil and stuff, right now, if I were them,
they would try to.
I would be the pioneer in these green energy industries, so that when gas dies away, that industry isn't. All of those people aren't just out of jobs. They've transitioned and pioneered the way towards saving the planet, which is, awesome. And it's going to be a super lucrative field. So they will have gone from being these people that destroyed the planet to being the ones that save it. And something that they should also look into is, because they're saying how the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is already too much.
Right.
Like, it's already so much that we have to find a way to pull it out in order to stop the runaway greenhouse gas effect. So they should be looking into that. Like, maybe there's a way to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere and bury it again. Like, compress it back into a chunk and bury it back in the earth. There's got to be someone's got to come up with this sort of technology.
You know what sucks is that there always seems to be this, like, it's like a power that would discourage people from, like, okay, so for example, if you just take climate change, for example, you ask someone like me who understands the science, who has seen the charts, who has read all of the evidence that came from the Royal Society and all of those places. Like, for me, that transition to electric, it is so small, the inconvenience, when my main goal is when I'm just worried about the environment. And so what that makes me see is that obviously people are not very well versed in understanding the science that it takes to understand what kind of situation we are in right now, and how important it is to even just consider trying to start little by little and stop trying to, like, drill into people's heads that, like, it's important to go fast and to accelerate really quickly. Like,
which electric cars do better.
Yeah. Lives are going to start getting harder, and this is all going to be because we wanted just these few little conveniences in our vehicles. Come on, we cannot be that, like.
And we're not so. We have the ability to make electric cars more convenient. Right. If we had the amount of resources that are being dumped into petroleum vehicles, into the industry of electric cars, the innovations that would take place very quickly and make these infinitely better would be just amazing. And it would happen really rapidly. And I think it's going to happen really rapidly very soon. So that's why I'm just more concerned about, for instance, I run an apartment complex. I recently did a resident satisfaction survey, and on there I put in descending order things like, what would you like to see as far as improvements or additions to the apartments? And one of the options that I put was potentially adding electric chargers, electric car chargers to around the parking lot. Across the board, it was the least voted item. It was categorized as the least important amenity to add. Oh my God. So that gave me a bit of pause, just thinking that But at the same time, like, I don't have an electric car, and
And probably the people who took it may not be the kind, like, for example, I would love one, but I know I couldn't afford one. So
Mhm.
it's not something I could, you know, say in the near future I would benefit from this said station. And I can understand that because it'd be different from you asking how many of you would have an electric vehicle given
Mhm.
the option.
If it was
Which is
affordable to
right,
you,
right.
yeah.
And then you would ask that
But
question
these
about
are
the
people
charging
that don't
stations.
have electric cars. They're probably not able to afford them, or looking
Right,
forward to being
right,
able to afford them in the near future. So
right,
of course they're not going to want that as an
right.
amenity.
Or at least it won't be the most important one considering their situation.
Right.
But again, like I said,
But to
like
me,
if you
that's the first step. There,
hmm
before anyone can even get an electric car, there has to be the
you need a way to
chargers.
charge it.
So maybe start a little bit at a time, one or two chargers. They're not that expensive to install.
Right.
It would use up a lot of electricity as people are charging off them, but
hmm
not many people are going to use them at first.
Plus, I'm really hoping that people will get smart when they start transitioning to electric and just make all of the charging stations pure solar panel and they just
Yeah,
charge in a battery underneath, like to store.
totally.
Dude,
Like have
just the
undercovered
sun.
parking,
Yeah.
and on top of the undercover parking is just solar
Yeah.
panels, and they're going into
It's
batteries.
just the cost of the product and the installation,
Mhm.
and then they'll tell you the sun does the rest, and it's
Yep.
like that's fucking great.
That's what I want to do when I build a tiny house.
It's to have
Is
that.
have the solar going into a battery that, like, there will be the battery that's running the house,
Mm-hmm.
and then I don't know enough about electricity to know if this is even how it works. It might just have to go
Dude,
off
let's
of
do
one
it.
or two batteries.
Imagination, Tesla.
But I imagine the solar panels going into one battery that's running the lights in the house and all the electric in the house, and then another battery that's solely devoted to the car charging station. So I park my car outside, charge it off of one battery
Nice.
that's always getting
Right.
filled by the sun, and then run my house off of the other battery.
I like that. Yeah, if I had that, I would probably soup it up too. Like solar panels on top. Some of those like walls that are solar panel, the windows are
Mhm.
pretty cool. But I would really want to use anaerobic digester just to take care of waste, so that I'm making sure I'm minimizing what goes to a landfill too.
Yeah. And that's going back into
yeah,
power your
back
house.
into power. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, and I was also thinking about this is a really simple design, but it's where you know how in like New York City they have the tanks of water on top of the roofs,
Mm-hmm.
so it kind of helps with pressure, so that when you turn on the water, you don't have to wait for it to come up the pipe like in a hotel from the
Mhm.
bottom. It just drops down.
Right.
That's what I would have on my house for the water, but it would be metal, so it would heat with sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
So minimum. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think when you allow people to, like, if you allow people the chance, you can really get people to do something like that, given the resources. But doesn't it seem like nobody's really like interested in the potential?
It's not only that. I feel like from above, they're making it
They squash it
super
as
hard.
if it's like not that big of a deal.
like just to with the tiny houses, for instance, which would be a huge benefit to the
Mhm.
planet if people started trying to
Mhm.
live more like that. It's hard. In most counties, tiny houses are illegal.
Really?
You can't build.
Do you know why?
I don't know.
They're
And
just
maybe
illegal.
I haven't looked into it too much, but the zoning laws and stuff, like, you can't just build a tiny house and put it on a piece of land in most counties. There's like specific regulations against it. Like, it needs to be built into the grid. It needs to be like a structured on a foundation. There's different laws as far as like whether or not it's classified as a trailer or a house. And so there's just a lot of these regulations that are like, oh, well, you know, this red tape here says you can't build a tiny house in this county. So unfortunately, no. So it to me, it just like the government, especially in local governments, they should be pushing people to
Make it easier
make it
to be
super easy to
renewable.
build sustainable,
Right.
renewable
Yeah.
houses.
Yeah,
And
I agree
I
with
feel like
you.
they're doing the opposite. Like,
making
it's
it
real-
harder. Yeah.
it's from the legal side, it's really easy to buy a huge mansion that's just going to juice the
No, imagine
grid.
where you have to grab the resources from too when you
Yeah.
ask for it.
But building a
Yeah.
tiny house off grid, for some reason, they make it
Like
really, really
dangerous or
hard.
something.
It's really difficult. Maybe they'll say it's a fire hazard or
Yeah.
various different things
I,
based
I,
on the zoning
I agree
laws.
with you.
Walk through open door for me. The water's warm in the ocean when it's
We were just talking about how. We were talking about how the government was going to incentivize.
Right, incentivize, or and that transition, what that transition would look like,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Where did we get? Oh, we were talking about tiny houses
Yeah,
and
being able
how
to-
they make it so difficult.
To make it a renewable energy home,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Have you seen Tesla's roofing tiles?
Yes,
They're
They look really
solar-powered
classy. They're
roofing
solar-powered,
tiles.
yeah.
They look like legit roofing tiles that would keep you dry
Yeah.
and warm. And they actually like all plug together,
uh-huh.
and then you have a cord coming down into your battery.
You know, I think
Super
it's
cool.
I think it's sad. Like, it sucks that it really took Tesla and like Elon Musk. Like, he had to like tell himself basically like, somebody's got to do this. Like, someone's gonna make
I guess
affordable
I'll do
electric
it.
cars, and luckily, yeah, there are options. But what I like you're saying, like, big corporations, they make it seem like it's not that big of a deal, because sometimes when I bring up solar energy to people, it's almost as if I get an attitude that it's this prehistoric technology.
Mm.
And it's like, no, it's like an emerging new technology. Like, think about it. It's a new way of getting energy, like, just straight up at no cost.
Mm-hmm.
Sunlight.
No cost to the planet either.
And no cost to the planet either. It would hit here anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like continuing this like all of these wires and like burning the coal to generate the electricity and then lunge it over here, and it's just like, man, once people found out about solar technology, like, I don't know why companies didn't just start immediately, so that by now you'd be king.
Yeah.
Like, you'd have the cheapest renewable energy system to install in homes.
Yeah.
You'd be the king.
Like a whole bunch of people working towards competing with each other,
Right.
trying to do it better and better.
Like,
just
cleaner than the other guy.
Yeah, cheaper, cleaner,
That'd be
better
great.
energy.
Yeah, but since it's about, like, I understand, it's about selling as much petroleum as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you can do an oligarchy, even better, because then there's no competition.
Mm-hmm.
You all just like...
Yeah, that's the
You all
problem.
just bulls on parade. Yeah. But otherwise, one thing I noticed is in my when I took my environmental science class, everyone in that class, I say everyone because the majority, it's not like I could have gone individually to each one, but everyone seemed really, really enthusiastic about the idea of having something like a renewable neighborhood, because our teacher had us do a little assignment where he said, like, draw out what a neighborhood would look like ideally to you that was renewable. And like, people just had a ton of fun with it. You should see like the creativity that young people have about how much better that would be. I mean, it's almost as if they know that the cost would be obviously cheaper. I mean, if you have an anaerobic digester, so you're like using the food you don't finish to like generate heat and stuff. Come on. Is that not the coolest shit ever? Instead, we freaking take it over to the freaking dumpster, and it freaking goes over to a landfill, and it freaking rots on top of all of the other plastic and stuff. And like, we truly need to be more efficient and change our attitude now, so that the future generations can continue the attitude and do it better.
Mm-hmm.
Than for us to be like, well, I mean, no one else is doing it. I freaking hate that. Like,
Because this is all just the baseline. Like, stopping fossil fuel production and usage is just the baseline.
Right.
We've
Like,
already
stop
gone too
pumping
far.
out. Yeah.
We need to have already stopped using any more.
Right.
And then find ways to fix the damage that we've caused to the
Like,
atmosphere.
yeah,
and
anything
the
we can
environment.
start to reverse it.
Like, that's where we should be right now as far as scientific advancement and innovation, is trying to fix the problems, not continuing
Right.
each year to use more and more fuel than the previous year. Like that needs to stop a long time ago.
I always wonder if the plastic that exists now, let's say that there's like a bacteria that can digest plastic right now currently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have the long-term effects of releasing something like that into the ocean?
I think it's just a small amount of this type of bacteria that they've found that they're just beginning to study. I think it's probably years and years out before any practical usage, but
That you can synthesize that reaction.
I assume it would be like some kind of a landfill or something, some kind of giant machine or container where they are growing this bacteria, and when you
Okay.
dump plastic into it, it just eats away at it
And they
and
multiply.
decomposes into bio waste.
So do they grow and multiply eating the plastic, or do you know it's each individual one just digests it and it's got nothing to do with reproduction?
I don't know. I don't know that much
'Cause-
about it. But if
'cause-
that's their like main food source, you would
Yeah.
think that they would reproduce and
Right.
multiply if they were surrounded by their main food source, just like
Right.
any other bacteria.
Because, dude, there's like a plastic scourge here in the earth. Like, it's just too much plastic, and I always wonder if we'll have a way to use it if we don't have a way to make it go away. Like a way to be like, yo, like they're making, let's just say they're using like the kind of plastic from like, 8-ounce water bottles and 12-ounce water bottles and all that like basic plastic. They're using all that plastic to make like new homes, and if you can collect enough for your own, like, you can make it. That would like make it like gold, to where it's like these are building materials where it's like it's easier than chopping down a tree.
Yeah,
you just can collect it.
You just dump it into a barrel that melts
3D.
it down and 3D prints a
Yeah,
house.
3D prints the house. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm saying. Like if one day you will be able to, like, let's say mix some other chemical in with all of this old melted plastic, and it would be a very solid, malleable material that would not go bad, that it won't melt in the sun. Like, it won't have its normal plastic properties like when it was a bottle. It'll have reinforced properties, but you need that plastic.
Another,
Mhm.
they would have to find a way to make sure it wasn't like it's safe to breathe, whatever's coming
Yeah, right,
off
to
of
live in it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing is that like, and the reason I make it like that way, that to make plastic valuable, is that it's just really hard to really get like a huge movement going into the ocean. I mean, there's a lot of people doing work though, like these boats that they're like this double boat that like swims, and it catches like a bunch of trash on the inside. It's basically like a sea trash bag that moves forward.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had a lot of those, it'd be awesome. The only thing is that there needs to be a use for them afterwards. I guess you could always come up with something. I mean, it's cool ass technology. It's a little boat that picks up trash in the water.
Yeah.
It might always need to be used, maybe. Like,
Yeah.
after everything gets cleaned, like, it won't be totally perfect, but at least there'll be a constant ocean cleanup all the time.
Then anything else that falls in will
Will
just
always
get
get picked
back
up,
out.
right? Instead of just turning into
Does
an
that-
island somewhere.
Does that, it just collects trash off the surface?
Yeah, like it like moves on the surface, and it's
So it's not
is
pulling
limited.
up fish
It wouldn't
and
be
sharks and
it wouldn't
stuff.
be going down or anything, but it's basically like, in pools where you have that little crevice where the water just barely.
Yeah.
It works
Okay,
like
I've
that.
seen those.
It works
Yeah.
like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. It'd be friendly. I mean, friendlier than the trash being in the water.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, just to circle back to anaerobic digesters.
digesters.
For those of you that don't know what they are, they're so cool.
Yeah, they're really cool. It's a machine that inside there's bacteria that digest material without using oxygen, and like the way we exhale CO2, what they digest and what they let out is
Isn't it
methane.
methane?
Methane gas burns clean and it doesn't smell, and you can use it to heat water, to cook, and it burns clean.
Yeah, so you essentially you would have this big kind of tent looking thing outside of your house, and you would put your food scraps, your I've seen people put, after they mow their lawn, they'll dump the grass in there, like any kind of bio material, basically.
Anything that would be that would have been a carbon-based organism.
And then the bacteria just eats away at it in the heat outside, and it breaks it down, turns it into methane, and then you have a tube coming from the digester feeding into your house and working kind of like a propane tank. Where it can power your house, and it can run directly into your stove burners, turn on. It's a really cool way to do renewable energy and just reuse your food scraps and stuff.
And just to piggyback off of Luke, I've seen 3 different types of looks for digesters. I've seen the tent. There's also ones that look like a big balloon, and those are the ones that they say you could squeeze it so it pumps out, so it's like more manual squeeze. And then they're the ones people have seen when they're driving by places like water treatment plants, or sometimes even like farms and stuff. It's those big like cement cylindrical buildings that have like a pipe that like goes up. That solid structure, it compresses the methane inside so that you can at will turn it on and turn it off.
And it's already
because
pressurized.
it's pressurized in there. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So a la like the bag one, it's kind of the same thing, but the bag would be soft, but you squeeze it out.
Something I want to do in my tiny house, which I'm sure you guys will hear on this podcast a lot, me obsessing about wanting to build a tiny house someday. But I want to put in a composting toilet. Nice. Because the whole idea of building a house and then also building a septic tank with plumbing that's going down into it, and it's just like you have to pump that out.
It seems inefficient, right? Like
it's like what's the point of all this? It's just a waste of money. It costs like $10,000 to put in a septic
especially
system.
If the option is included that you can turn your waste into energy.
Yeah. And I don't know if human waste can go into a digester, but I assume it can.
I think you can.
But basically, so composting toilets are cool though, because there's all different kinds. There's one where it has like a fan and it vents the inside out of the house. Okay. So it doesn't create any smell. Oh, nice. There's ones where basically all it is a bucket. It's essentially it's a bucket and a little like canister that separates number 1s and number 2s. And so the number 1s you pull out, and I think you have to dilute it somehow before you can pour it on the ground, or it's really bad for grass and stuff. Like you can't just pour pee all over your garden.
Right.
And the number 2s
would have to get treated right in there somewhere, right? Or you?
Well, they work like bacteria.
Okay.
There's bacteria in there.
Okay, cool.
And there's kinds where you use sawdust, like you pour in a scoop of sawdust and mix it, and it eats away, and the bacteria works with it to make it not really smell.
Yeah.
And you just empty it out like once every 2 weeks.
Oh.
So it all just sits in there. Some of them have cranks, so it mixes the sawdust into the... We call it humanure.
Yeah. Nice.
But then, so there's a lot of different ways to use it, but you can take the number 2s out and put it in like basically a humanure pile or a compost pit of some kind. And you have to let it sit for, I think it's like 2-3 years. I don't know exactly how long.
Before you can do anything.
And then once it's sat for that amount of time, you can use it on your garden.
Okay.
Or you can use it as fertilizer. You can use it in various other ways. Like it's safe to use at a certain point, but you can't just take it and put it straight on your garden, for instance. That's not safe.
Do you know how the biology would work if you just put your number 2 into your compost pile?
I don't know.
Like
not
the immediate number 2, but the 2-week-old dried number 2 into.
I think it would have to be like 2-year-old
before you even threw it into a compost pile. That's crazy. Yeah. That's a lot of bad bacteria in there then.
Yeah, because it's there's a lot of reasons why you shouldn't go near that stuff before it's like had time.
You know what? I think I'm gonna see if you can do number 2 into an anaerobic digester, because that would be nice.
That'd be a constant fuel source for your house for sure. But that's to me that seems super smart. Like you don't have to, then when you're building your house, you don't have to install all of that sewage plumbing and worry about it's called black water.
Like
The gray water is the stuff you use on your dishes, when you're showering, all that
you can
stuff.
reuse it in the toilet to flush.
As long as with the gray water in your house, as long as you're using products that are eco-friendly,
it's
like,
fine. Yeah.
you can actually use that gray water to water your plants, your garden
Oh,
outside.
nice.
Like if you have shampoo that's eco-friendly,
That'll work in the garden.
it'll just you can
okay.
funnel your gray water directly onto your garden,
Right,
water
because
your
there's
lawn.
none of the chemicals that rip the grease out of your hair.
Yeah.
yeah.
And then so you don't even have to worry about
Yeah.
the gray water because you're just reusing it. And then
That's
the
what-
black water is non-existent.
Yeah,
if you have a composting toilet.
I that was the other thing I would have in my house is that the sink would be attached to the gray water from my sink would be attached to the top tank of my toilet.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. You have to be really careful about what you're washing off of your hands. And
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, for sure. If you're reusing it
If you're
in any
using
way.
it. And if
But-
it has to run through other pipes and such things like that.
Another alternative that I want to do to heat the house
Mm-hmm.
is just a really tiny wood stove. If you have a tiny house that's like 200 or less square feet, tiny little wood stove
Can heat the whole thing.
can heat the whole house. You just you light it for like a little bit, collect some wood from outside and light it
Or it can be a fake wood and use a methane fireplace.
from your digester. It could, yeah. Why not?
I mean, you wouldn't want to be chopping down trees because that would imply that you were
Right, but
taking
trees die, and you
Yeah,
can go
like you
collect the
scavenge.
wood. And
Yeah.
it'd be pretty cool. I think the more sustainable you can get. My goal is to just be completely off grid,
Yeah.
not be connected to the grid in any way, and powering the house completely from renewable sources.
Right.
That'd
Yeah,
be super cool.
that'd be cool too. And that kind of sucks having to be connected to the grid.
Hmm.
I mean,
And for me, it originates from a very zombie apocalypse part of my psyche, where it's like
That's great.
if society ever completely collapses,
uh-huh.
I know that I'll still be just fine.
Right.
with
You can run things still.
I can still run everything I need to without being connected to the grid or relying on any external forces. I'll have my garden that I can eat the majority of my food out of, like, at least for a few years.
You know, that got me thinking. I learned in my environmental science class that like a lot of all of the states that run alongside the Colorado River, they just pump water out of it.
Mm.
And a lot of it gets used for big factories and such. But I was going to say, what do you think it would be like if everyone had, let's just use a tiny house or even small, just for that matter, like just anything that's not excessive. And these are all communities that live alongside the Colorado River. Do you believe that if everyone had gray water systems installed and methane, there would be a lot less water consumption? So it could be left in the river for like the ecosystem that the river runs through. People would use less water. Well, because like, for example, you have to think of industry. Is industry going to change if everybody had like a small efficient house?
If the mindset of everyone is changing so much so that they are building these tiny houses and really putting that much effort into their life, the other areas of their lives that use up a lot of water,
like overconsumption culture would probably go away.
The consciousness, I mean, about how much water is going into your food, like into different agriculture, into clothes production, various things. You're gonna naturally start to look into those things more as you become more eco-friendly in other ways, I think.
Right.
So yeah, of course. Because what we're talking about is a mindset change, not just.
I think the mindset change would have to happen then before the small houses, though, because like, for example, I like the idea of a small house too, because it's just efficient. It's not like I ever got used to living in a big ass 5-bedroom house.
And you don't need all that space. The less space you have, it encourages you to buy less things.
Yeah, I think so
that
too.
you don't need because you can't store it anywhere.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense to me. And on the same vein of that water usage, another thing I want to add to my house is a big water tank. It would just be next to the house.
Yeah.
But the roof of the house would be made and designed to collect rainwater
Oh, nice.
and funnel it
it
straight
back in there.
into there. And then
Nice.
hopefully you live in an area where you're getting enough rainwater to just, you'd have to take showers like, which I've been trying to do lately just
Mhm.
as an experiment, where when you get in the shower, you turn the water on and get your body wet, turn the water off,
And then scrub.
and then soap up
Yeah.
your body, put in the shampoo,
Yeah.
and then turn it on to rinse it all off.
Right.
Because I feel like
Sometimes you
all
just
that
sit
water
there.
in between that you're just sitting there, that's all wasted water.
That's true.
So you could save a lot. You could use a lot less water than you think if you're just really, really conscious about it like that.
Right.
Like every drop is really important because you've only got that one tank out back, and it hasn't rained in a couple weeks, so
Right.
you've only
I don't know if you ever saw this, but online they were trying to sell this little device. I don't even know what to call it, but what it was it was like this little unit that had this like cooling piece in the center. And what happened was that wind would go through it, or air moisture, and would cool it to the dew point for it to condense onto this cold pipe and then drip down.
and collect water.
And it would just be pulling water straight out of the air.
Whoa.
Yes, and they were advertising it for like bikers because it was like on the top of their water bottle, and since they're like riding their bike, it's like just like kind of like collecting
condensation.
condensation.
That's really
And so
cool.
and so I thought, like, if you're just we're using our imagination now. You piggyback off of that idea into something bigger that would be on top of your house. You would always have like a drip of water all the time.
Yeah, that's
Because it
That's
doesn't,
really cool.
and if there was more humidity in the air, like if it had just rained, it'd be like pouring,
be like trickling
just
down.
trickling down.
That's a
That's
really
crazy,
cool
right?
thing, yeah.
Like, I mean, I like playing around with ideas that are just like more efficient like that. But since I had seen that, I'm like, I can think of in places where water is just not available and it's hot, like something like that would really
Just
help
pull it out of the
communities. Yeah, just set up a ton of them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I think the cool thing about building your own tiny house is like you can incorporate all of these ideas slowly over time.
Yeah,
Like if a new technology arises that
Like, put
makes
it
it
on.
easier, you just hook it up to
change
your
it on.
system and plan ahead.
Yeah.
And you can still build in the hookups to like plug it into the grid, like
Uh.
because it's hard to just dive in to 100% off grid living. Like
Right.
so if you want to start by still having water running,
Mhm.
then you can try to like meter it and see how much you're using, and then base that on what size tank you need to get based on how much it rains
Yeah.
in your area. Like,
Or what size family lives in the tiny house.
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's cool, man. I mean, dude, these ideas are really like they're super attractive in a time that you just feel like buying a house doesn't feel as normal of an option as it might have felt like 30 or 40 years ago.
and because the normal thing to do back 30-40 years ago was you go to college,
Yeah.
you have a couple kids,
Salary job.
you get a salary job, and then you get into a mortgage for $200,000 or $300,000 that you're going to be paying off until you retire.
Right.
And that's just like, that was the acceptable
Right.
way of this is how it's done. But for me, that's just not.
It's not a possibility nowadays when you look at like what kind of like one thing I had heard is that lately you don't see a lot of jobs as you see like a lot of gig work
Mhm.
like Uber, Airbnb, where you're kind of like doing your little like on the side work. But I think the fact that things are getting automated now throws a huge wrench in that whole plan where your high school degree got you a salary job that was able to save up money for vacation every year and your children's college, and that your wife didn't have to work if you were a man.
Make your mortgage payments.
And make your mortgage payments is like, when did that, like, what time was that? What fairy tale time?
Yeah, it doesn't exist
Yeah,
anymore.
it doesn't, I don't see.
And not to mention, even if you have all that, if you get laid off
Mhm.
suddenly
Mhm.
and you can't find a comparable job for the
Right.
next 2-3 years,
You're screwed.
you have all of those mortgage and car payments
Yeah.
and
no health
children's
insurance if you were
college
getting
payments,
insurance through. Yeah.
which you were probably getting your insurance through work. It's a very risky life.
Yeah.
Like I would rather save,
Uh-huh.
buy a house for
Right,
cash,
right,
or build a house for cash,
right.
and then make it off grid, so you're never going to
Mhm.
have an electric bill, you're never going to have a water bill, like
mhm.
you won't have any bills
Right.
from that point on.
It
just-
takes the pressure off being a millionaire, you know, like
yeah.
it's not being a millionaire. I mean, like
Yeah.
because you don't have those savings where you could just
And then every
Ball
penny
out
you
when you're
make
old.
from then on is yours to dump into retirements or investments or whatever, vacations, whatever you want to do
Mhm.
with it, rather than having to worry about, being a
like
slave.
the next medical
to
bill
money.
that you can't afford.
Hmm.
I need new tires. Like my windshield's fucking cracked. That's a real one right now.
I just got mine fixed
I
finally.
still need to get mine fixed.
Yeah. So what Malia and I want to do is
Mhm.
build like a tiny house community.
Oh, nice.
Like buy a big plot of land,
like a shire.
and then yeah,
Yeah,
and then
that'd be
encourage
tight.
a bunch of like-minded people to come and build tiny houses, or bring their built tiny house, just park it on the property,
That could be a tourism.
have an eco-friendly little
That's
community.
a tourism idea, dude.
yeah. They exist all
Yeah.
over the place already. They're starting to pop up, like just friends getting together and building these little
Right.
eco-friendly houses. And
I think Colorado is a great spot for that because you can enjoy the nature
mhm.
by also being like eco-friendly in your stay there in your
Yeah.
like hospitality experience.
For
That's pretty
sure.
cool. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great idea.
And you could have like a community garden outside
Mhm.
that you all share, and just build it with some close friends that have similar interests and ideas about the world. And
And capital.
yeah, exactly. So, all right, I think that we're coming to the end of our
Coming to our
podcast.
time.
Thank you so much for listening. I guess to circle it back around,
Mm-hmm.
if you had to summarize, what is the solution for the guy that just bought that Land Rover?
I think the solution for him is just going to be a hard, like, drive it at your own risk, whatever the law may be. And I don't know how severe they would try to implement that.
But this
said
guy-
law.
Maybe this guy, what if this guy really wants to switch to electric, but now he can't afford it because he's $40,000 deep?
I think that I don't think the government will be able to enforce a law that they don't equip the citizens to be able to follow.
Right.
Yeah.
So there will have to be some kind of subsidies or
A subsidy, something he can do
incentives.
to change some rental, or some like the government lets him borrow a certain amount or something. Like they'll need help, because if the government really needs to go through with it, they're gonna need to assist the people who rely on cheap petroleum vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Or
And
Land Rovers.
someone needs to come up with an idea of how to make these old gas vehicles more valuable.
Right.
Once you can't drive them anymore, someone who's going to buy them off all these people?
I mean, I wonder what you can do with the scraps for these cars. I mean, it's kind of like this freshly off the line vehicle will need to go like just get recalled completely and
Yeah.
then turned into an electric. I mean,
If they could turn them into electric cars, that'd be cool. I just don't know if that's a possibility with all the moving parts inside specifically geared towards processing gas and oil.
right.
Like,
Right.
I don't know that the
They have all this
shell of
extra
the car
stuff, like the
might
pistons.
be accessible. Yeah.
Like the pistons is a purely like explosion based thing that it needs.
All right. Well, if you're listening and you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know what the answer is.
Yeah, let us know what you think would be a solution, and if you think that maybe it's time we make an effort to start moving in that direction, so it's not so hard in the next 10 years.
And with that, this has been the Millennial Experience podcast. Thanks for listening. Have a nice day or night.
Thank you, everyone.
Try it on for me, 'cause I'm too scared of a mirror and of a monster I might